Have you ever spoken the truth, only to be ignored? Imagine a man who did just that, 2,800 years ago. A simple shepherd, an outsider, yet chosen to deliver a message from God. His name was Amos, and his warning was clear, but no one listened. Amos was not a priest, nor a king. He was an ordinary man, a herdsman and a caretaker of sycamore trees. Yet, he saw what others refused to see, a nation drowning in sin, blind to the consequences ahead. He spoke against corruption, against hypocrisy, against injustice, but his words fell on deaf ears. His story is not just ancient history, it is a lesson for today. Because his warning was not just for Israel. It was for every generation that refuses to listen to the voice of truth. In the next few minutes, we will uncover the life of Amos, the warnings he gave, and why his message is more relevant now than ever. But before we understand his prophecy, we must first understand the man himself. Chapter 1, Who was Amos? The shepherd called by God. Amos was not born into power. He was not a prophet by lineage or training. He was a shepherd, a tender of sycamore trees, Amos 7 verses 14 to 15. A man of the fields, working under the sun, far from the halls of kings and priests. And yet, God chose him. This choice was no accident. Throughout history, God has often chosen the unlikely, the simple, the overlooked, to carry his most powerful messages. Just as he called Moses, a stuttering fugitive, David, a young shepherd, and Peter, a fisherman, he called Amos to speak truth to a nation unwilling to listen. Imagine this happening today, a farmer, a mechanic, an ordinary worker suddenly proclaiming judgment upon the most powerful leaders of the land. How would the world react? Would they listen, or would they dismiss him as unqualified, unworthy? Amos had no title, no position, but he had a mission. Because when God speaks, it is not the credentials of the messenger that matter, but the weight of the message. But what did he see that others refused to acknowledge? What darkness was consuming his people? In the next chapter, we will step into the world of Amos and witness the corruption that led to his urgent warning. Chapter 2, The Vision of Sin, a Corrupt Society. When Amos looked at Israel, he did not see a strong and prosperous kingdom. He saw a rotting foundation, one that was on the verge of collapse. On the surface, Israel was thriving. Trade flourished, the economy was strong, and religious ceremonies continued as usual. But beneath this illusion, corruption and injustice festered. Amos 5 verses 11 to 12 paints a grim picture. You trample on the poor and force them to give you grain. You oppress the innocent and take bribes. You deprive the poor of justice in the courts. Israel's wealth was built on oppression. The powerful exploited the weak, and the courts were filled with bribery instead of righteousness. The very people meant to uphold justice had become the source of suffering. Empty religion, hollow worship. Even more disturbing, Israel continued its religious practices as if nothing was wrong. They still brought sacrifices. They still held feasts. They still gathered to worship. But to God, it was all meaningless. Amos 5 verses 21 to 23 delivers a chilling message. I despise your religious festivals, your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Away with the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps. Their worship was a lie. Their rituals were empty. They honored God with their lips, but their hearts were far from Him. Imagine a nation that boasts of faith yet turns its back on justice. A society that claims devotion but thrives on greed and deception. Does this sound familiar? Amos saw through the illusion. He saw that destruction was near. But what was God's response to this corruption? What judgment awaited a people who refused to change? In the next chapter, we will uncover the terrifying vision that Amos received, a warning that was ignored, but never forgotten. Chapter 3, The Ignored Warning, a judgment foretold. The visions Amos received were not just words, they were terrifying glimpses into the fate of Israel. One of the most haunting images was that of a basket of ripe summer fruit, Amos 8 verses 1 to 2. At first, it seemed harmless. But its meaning was devastating. The time is ripe for my people Israel, I will spare them no longer. The fruit was ready for harvest, just as Israel was ripe for judgment. The sins of the nation had reached their full measure, and there was no more delay. The end was near. What followed was a vision of desolation. The fall of the cities, the strongholds of Israel would crumble, and its people would be taken into exile. Famine, not of food, but of God's word, a time would come when they would seek divine guidance, but none would be found. Darkness at noon, a sign of total upheaval, where even the heavens would mourn for what was coming. Yet, even with such dire warnings, Israel refused to listen. They continued to live as if nothing would happen, as if their wealth and power would protect them. But no nation, no kingdom, no empire can stand when God's judgment is at the door. And so, the warning was given. But the people turned away. Why did they ignore it? Why do people reject truth, even when destruction is imminent? In the next chapter, we will uncover how the leaders of Israel tried to silence Amos, and what that reveals about those who reject uncomfortable truths today. Chapter 4, The People's Resistance, Confronting Power. Amos did not just face indifference, he faced outright resistance. His words were not just ignored, they were seen as a threat to those in power. The religious and political leaders did not want to hear of judgment, and they certainly did not want the people to listen. One of the most striking confrontations came when Amaziah, the high priest of Bethel, accused Amos of treason. In Amos 7 verses 12 to 13, Amaziah commands him, "Go back to Judah, seer. Earn your bread there and do your prophesying there. Do not prophesy anymore at Bethel, because this is the king's sanctuary and the temple of the kingdom." Bethel was not just any city, it was the religious center of Israel. The temple there had become a place of corrupted worship, intertwined with political power. Amos was exposing the truth, and for that, they wanted him gone. The reaction of Israel's leaders reveals a truth that has echoed throughout history: those in power often silence the voices that threaten their control. Truth versus convenience. Amos could have retreated. He could have obeyed and returned to his quiet life as a shepherd. But he refused to be silenced. His response to Amaziah was firm. "I was neither a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but I was a shepherd, and I also took care of sycamore fig trees. But the Lord took me from tending the flock and said to me, 'Go, prophesy to my people Israel.'" Amos 7 verses 14 to 15. Amos was not a prophet by choice, but by calling. And no earthly authority could override the command of God. But this resistance was not unique to ancient Israel. Even today, truth is often silenced when it becomes inconvenient. Those who challenge corruption, expose injustice, or call for change often face opposition, censorship, or worse. Israel's leaders thought they could silence Amos and avoid judgment. But judgment does not disappear just because it is ignored. In the next chapter, we will see the final outcome of Amos' warnings. Did his words make any difference? Was there any hope left for Israel? And what does his story teach us today? Chapter 5, The Legacy of Amos. Listen before it's too late. The people ignored Amos. The leaders rejected him. But did that mean his words were powerless? Far from it. Shortly after his prophecy, Israel fell. The Assyrians invaded, the cities were destroyed, and the people were exiled. The judgment Amos foretold became a reality. "The days are coming," declares the sovereign Lord, "when I will send a famine through the land, not a famine of food or a thirst for water, but a famine of hearing the words of the Lord." Amos 8 verse 11. They refused to listen while they had the chance. And when they finally wanted to hear, it was too late. Yet, Amos' prophecy was not just about destruction, it was also about hope. In his final words, he spoke of restoration. "I will restore David's fallen shelter, I will repair its broken walls and restore its ruins, and will rebuild it as it used to be." Amos 9 verse 11. Judgment would come, but so would renewal. The same God who brings justice also offers redemption. The question is, will we listen in time? Because Amos' warning was not just for Israel. It is for every generation that forgets justice, embraces corruption, and silences truth. The voice of the prophet still echoes. But the choice remains ours. Will we listen before it's too late? The voice that still echoes. A shepherd. A vision. A warning. A rejection. A judgment. Amos' story is not just history, it is a mirror. It reflects our world, our choices, and the consequences of ignoring truth. How many warnings have we ignored in our own lives? How often do we silence uncomfortable truths instead of facing them? The people of Israel thought they were untouchable. They were wrong. And today, as history repeats itself, the voice of Amos still calls out. Let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. Amos 5 verse 24. The question is not whether the warning exists. The question is, will we listen? What do you think? Have you ever ignored a warning you later regretted? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insights into ancient wisdom that still speaks today. The past is written. The future is in our hands.